Yes, Geordies, welcome back to another episode. First thing, hope everyone's well. We'll play Fulham tonight, and it is a big game. And I'm not even talking about the result. I want a performance, I want some energy, I want a bit of life, and I want us to try and actually win a game of football. So it's a massive game, not for the players, but for Eddie Howe, in my opinion. Now, I don't watch press conferences. I'll openly admit that because I think it's a waste of time, and you get the same old spiel from the managers. Every single press conference before and after games, I just read about them afterwards. But we are going to talk about Eddie Howe's press conference yesterday leading up to this Fulham game. And then we're going to break down Maghnes Aklouche because we have been linked to this guy again. Now, I just want to say 6 months ago, I made a video on this guy. 6 months ago was during the transfer window. This would have been one of my top 3 choices above Anthony Elanga. So make sure you stick around for the Maghnes Aklouche analysis, and I'll do my very best to tell you everything you need to know about him. Might not be good enough, I'm not perfect, but I'll do my best. But we'll have to spend a couple of minutes, not long, because I just got a few words on this to talk about that press conference. Now, Eddie Howe was asked about Sunday, the derby game, and he said, part of my job is to remain very level-headed. First thing I want to say about Eddie Howe here. Now, I'm not going to read all that out here because you've probably heard it a million times before, but Eddie Howe is very meticulous and very articulate in what he says in press conferences, and I think you need that as a manager. As a manager, you need to learn that emotional intelligence. You need to learn how to control your words, your emotions in press conferences for the good and the bad, because sometimes you lose when you don't deserve to lose, and you can't get too down or emotional, and you need to control it and say there is positives to take from that defeat. So I get it, and Eddie Howe seems intelligent, and you can tell he's learned how to control with pressure, stress management levels, and that is very, very important for a manager. In fact, it's important in life because life is difficult. Everybody goes through their problems, and it's how you overcome them or figure out a way of just managing them. And Eddie Howe does this brilliantly. This one of my big positives about Eddie Howe. So I understand what he's trying to do. He's trying to manage it, not get too hung up on the roller coaster of emotions. I get it. But what I don't get is he speaks about the importance of being honest with the players, and the players need to be honest back with him. Now, I'm going to be honest. Him in these press conferences after the Sunderland game and in this one is completely disingenuous. I'm not going to say much about it, but I think he's taken fans for fools, because talking in this manner, talking in this way, and not having a reality check about Sunday, then it's patronizing and borderline arrogant. And sometimes you need to be honest and just take accountability and say it wasn't good enough. We're going to put it right. This is what I didn't like about it. We didn't press like I wanted to do. We didn't play like I wanted to do. We didn't have the energy like I wanted to do. But to sit there and say there's positives to take from that Sunderland game is a joke. Now, I don't mind not pressing as much. I think it's important. I think we did have burnout last time we were in European football. So it's not about not pressing enough. It's about not pressing at all. We do not have any triggers, any patterns of play set, any ability to win the ball back, but have any idea when we do win the ball. And I'm not here to sit and shit on Eddie Howe, because that's not what I'm doing. I'm just trying to say that fans see through the bullshit. They absolutely do. And if they know there's something wrong, they can feel there's something wrong. But when he says that he doesn't sometimes know what type of mentality he's going to get from his squad, that's a concern, because that tells me he's not in touch with his squad. Every single manager should know every little identity of every single player, in my opinion. And sometimes you get a feel for things. You get a feel for a person's emotions. And if you don't think their head is in the right place, then you don't play them. But to say that you don't know what you're going to get from your squad, I'm sorry, guys, that's a little bit of a concern. Then what's even more deeply concerning, speaks about the concern of away goals, which is incredibly right, but there's a bigger concern here, because he also spoke about the evolution of the tactics and the squad. The evolution needs to fit the profile of squad that you've got, and unfortunately what he's trying to do doesn't fit the profile of squad that we've got. Now, I keep on seeing comments that, oh, we should change to a 4-2-3-1, everything will be fine. Let me tell you something. Unless Eddie Howe changes the behaviours of the players, it won't be fine. Think about how many teams in the world play a 4-2-3-1 formation. Think about how many teams in the world play a 4-3-3 formation, but not every team plays the same. You can instruct the formation, but the formation isn't the most important thing. It's the importance of behaviours. Let's say we change to a 4-2-3-1 and we actually played somebody as a number 10. If Eddie Howe continues to get them sitting in a 4-5-1 in a low block and a deep block, it's not going to make a difference. If he doesn't give them the freedom to find pockets of space, he doesn't give them the freedom and the license to support attacks and things like that, then nothing will change. A lot of teams set up in the same way. A lot of teams. Think about the amount of teams in Europe. There is loads of Europes, and the most common formation is a 4-2-3-1. But the behaviours of every single team is different. And I give you an example yesterday. Como set up in a 4-2-3-1 for the majority of the time. Chelsea set up in a 4-2-3-1 the majority of the time. But they attack differently, they defend differently. The behaviours of the players are different. The wingers act different on both teams. So unless Eddie Howe is willing to change his behaviours of how he's instructing these players, nothing will change. And again, I absolutely do not mind Eddie Howe trying to evolve. I actually don't mind him trying to not press as aggressive because he's trying to manage the minutes, trying to manage the workload and the injuries. I get it, but you've got to have some sort of press. You've got to at least try and win the ball back. You've got to have a plan for when you win the ball back, but you've also got to have players that are willing and able to keep possession. And we just simply don't have that. But Eddie Howe also needs to give them the platform and the ideas on how to get the best out of every single player and how to create patterns on how to keep possession. You might not have the most technical squad in the world, but you can set up patterns of play to break down the opposition. We're doing none of that. So Eddie Howe needs to take accountability. And the only thing I've got to say on this, right? Eddie Howe says Bruno was 90% of the time and he doesn't agree with the word messy. One thing I will say, Bruno was 100% right and Eddie Howe after the Sunderland game was so out of touch. Now, what's worrying me even more, James Bunn's come in, what was it, last season? And his job was to manage injuries, prevent injuries. And ever since then, we have been doing that. So give me his credit. But our press has also dropped off. Now, Eddie Howe going into this season must have knew that we were going to a more positional, possession-based team. And that is fine. Like I've said, that is fine. But why sign Anthony Elanga that doesn't fit that profile of identity or the way you want to play? One of the biggest things about scouting isn't about just looking at the player and the individual. It's about looking at the team and how that team gets the best out of that player. Because you might look at the player and think he's absolutely magnificent, but he might not be the right profile for your team because that team might play in a complete different way to what you play. And again, this goes back to what I always say, the behaviors. So when you go to scouting, it's not about just scouting the player himself. It's about looking at the way the team play. How does that team get the best out of that player? Can I do the same as part of what I'm building? But on the flip side of that, you also spot players where you see something in the player and you see that that team is not getting the best out of that player. So what I mean by that is that player might be struggling in that specific team, but you might identify some attributes where you think, right, if I bring him into this team and play him this way and give him these behaviors, then he might approach the game differently. He might be a better player. So it works both ways, but it's important to identify how the team play. For example, Maghnes Aklouche. If we're gonna speak about him in a minute, but if Eddie Howe plays like he plays now, then you're not going to get the best out of him. Because if you just tell him to sit in a 4-5-1 and just protect his zone, then you're not going to get the best out of him. You need to give him that freedom. You need to allow him to enjoy his football, and that's where you get the best out of him. None of our players have given that freedom at the minute. And again, this comes back to what I'm saying. And I'm sick of saying this word, behaviours. And think back, right? Have we changed formation from last season? No. Have we changed formation from the season before? No. What we changed? The mentality, the behaviors, the instructions. So it's not always about the formation. And this is what I'm trying to say. So let's move on to Maghnes Aklouche because we have been linked to him. And also, we've been linked to a left back that I've previously spoken about in these videos. Now, in my opinion, we should go and sign him because he's the profile that we need. And I also know Tottenham are looking at him. So let's get him before anybody else does. Be a bit brave in the transfer market. Take calculated risks. And speaking of calculated risks, let's look at Maghnes Aklouche. We'll look at his profile. We'll look at his strengths, weaknesses. We'll look at his stats. And we'll just speak about the good and the bad, and I'll give you my opinion for what it's worth. He was born in France on 25th of February 2002, and then he said 2022. He's 23 at the minute. He's got French, Algerian nationalities. Now, he came through the Monaco Academy, who he joined in 2017. He's represented France at under 20s, under 21, senior levels, and he also won the silver medal at the Olympics for France. Now, he's had 177 senior appearances, including playing in the Champions League, with 19 goals, 21 assists to his name. This is him after he got his first and second international call-ups. Now, I'm not going to read it all out, but I'm going to leave it on there if you want to read it. But pretty much it's the type of profile that we're crying out for. Somebody that is comfortable between the lines, somebody that is innovative when he's in possession, that can beat the press, beat a man, comfortable, progressing play, but also got that decisiveness and that mentality where he just wants to provide for his striker. He wants to create for his teammates, and that's exactly what we need in our squad. Our squad is built on athletes. Players that can run in behind, that thrive and rely on pace and directness, whereas Maghnes Aklouche is a little bit different. This is why he's not actually a winger. He's more of a wide playmaker, and this is what we're going to talk about in this video, because he gets so many different types of wingers. You get your inverted wingers, you get your classic wingers, you get your wide playmakers, you get your inside forwards. So there's many different profiles of wingers that you can get. And again, this is what I'm talking about, the behaviors. The category I would put Maghnes Aklouche in is more of an inverted winger or a wide playmaker. Now, here's just a couple of quotes from him and his manager, and then, in my opinion, the best positions for him. Now, this is what he said about providing for his striker. He said, Mika, who is a Monaco striker, always positions himself well, so when you serve him, it often results in a goal. I will try to create as many assists as possible. If I need to score, I will. I love that mentality. He wants to provide for his striker. That's exactly what we need. That is a mentality that Jacob Murphy had. This is a guy that will get into the box if he has to, but also he's got that ability to find his striker, to spot runners, and that's what we need in our squad. Somebody that has the ability to open up the game. Might not always get it right, and I'm going to show you clips and images where he gets it wrong, but I don't mind that when you've got your flair players that want to take risks. And I also enjoyed this quote from his manager last season. He is a totally different player to France's other players. He's brave, always dribbling, and always has an idea. He has a big career in front of him, and I'm encouraged to see where he can go. Now, where would he fit in Newcastle United squad? In my opinion, he could play as a winger, but instead of categorizing him as a winger, he would be more of a wide playmaker. Somebody that would drift inwards and come into those central areas. You never see Anthony Elanga doing that. So again, Eddie Howe would have to change the behaviours of his wingers. He would have to give them the license to come inside, because you'll often see Maghnes Aklouche come inside. Even if you look at their heat maps from last season, so this is Anthony Elanga at Nottingham Forest. So I've done it over a full season. And if you compare it to Maghnes Aklouche at Monaco, the difference is unbelievable. Maghnes Aklouche is somebody that wants to come inside, receive the ball on the half turn, and then he opens up the game. That's why he has to be profiled with a dynamic fullback. Luckily enough, we've got a dynamic fullback like Tino Livramento. Partnering Maghnes Aklouche with somebody like Dan Burn at left back, for example, that type of profile just wouldn't work, because you need somebody to create the width. That's what Tino can do. Now, could he play as a number 10? Absolutely. I think he's got the skill set, the attributes to play as a number 10, because that's how he sees the game. But whether or not Eddie Howe goes to a 4-2-3-1, I'm not so sure. Now, could he play as a midfielder in a 4-3-3? Well, he could, but he could only play the Bruno role, where he's tasked with the responsibility of creating. But in terms of the players alongside him, to get the best out of him, you would have to profile him with elite ball winners, because he does work hard defensively, but he hasn't got that dual winning ability. He doesn't have that physicality like a Joe Linton, for example. Before we dive into how he's performing this season, I just want to bring this graphic on the screen, because this clearly identifies what he's all about. Now, look at him. This is when he was playing right wing in one game against Strasbourg, but you can see all of his passes all over the pitch. So he is somebody that will drift around the pitch. He likes to roam, get into half spaces, create space for himself, create space for his teammates. That's the kind of mentality he's got. Now, he's the creative spark for Monaco. That's what I like to call him. He's that person that gets involved in everything, likes to have the ball at his feet, likes to open up the game, and likes to try and break down the opposition. And that's a mentality of player we need. Now, if you look at some of these graphics, it's not all about playing in the final third. He's more than happy to drop into deeper areas, receive the ball, and then progress the ball, because these are just two instances against Strasbourg this season where he's come and collected the ball. So he's happy to drop in those deeper areas. But if you see where he's collecting the ball here, it's extremely central. This is when he's playing right wing, by the way. So again, you need to give him that license just to get on the ball and make things happen. So if we compare him to his Monaco teammates, this is what I mean about being that spark, being that little bit of life in the play. Because when you compare him to Monaco teammates this season, he has been simply outstanding. Goals and assists combined, he sits top with 7. Expected assists, 3.1 per 90. He sits top. Just to give you some context to that, the person who sits second is only creating 2.2 expected assists per 90. So he's way out ahead. And when I'm scouting or looking at stats, I prefer to look at expected assists rather than the actual assists, because you can put it on a plate for your striker and he might miss the open goal and you don't get that assist, but the expected assist tells you like the quality of chances he's creating. Key passes, he sits first with 19. Passes in the penalty area, he sits first with 21. Passes in the final third, he sits second with 55. Shot creating actions, he sits first with 50. And again, to put that in context, the person that sits second only has 28. Now, more importantly, he's created the most shots from defensive actions. So that tells you a couple of things. He presses hard. He's good at winning the ball back in the final third. But the best thing about it, he wins the ball back, but has an idea on what to do once he's got possession, and that is create for his team. Now, he also sits top for progressive carries with 44, carries in the final third, and he sits second for carries in the penalty area. Now, this is important. He sits first for progressive passes received. Now, why is that important? Because I often speak about having players in advanced areas that you can play the ball to. Now, when you're instructing somebody like Maghnes Aklouche, somebody that has that innovation in possession, you want him in dangerous areas. And this is one of our problems this season, is everybody is camped in our own defensive third. So when Nick Valdemara does get the ball in advanced areas, he's got no help. Now, to move it on, he sits third for tackles won in the whole Monaco squad. He's won the most tackles in the attacking third, and he actually ranks first when it comes for ball recoveries. So yes, he's got that quality in possession. Yes, he likes to make things happen on a football pitch, but he works hard off the ball, and that's shown in his numbers. Let's talk about his in possession style, the creative spark, technical skill, exceptional close control and dribbling, particularly in tight spaces, allowing them to turn away from opponents. Now, one thing I will say, Maghnes Aklouche does not possess the speed of an Anthony Elanga, but my God, can he change direction quickly. That ability just to modulate his speed extremely easy allows him to bypass the press. But he's somebody that will take many short touches to open up passing lanes. But even if a passing lane gets cut off, he's got the quality and the technical ability to retain possession, and that is important. Now, one thing I will say, he doesn't always get it right, and this was one of my biggest criticisms of him, because sometimes he will come and collect the ball. And here's an example of him collecting the ball from his right back. If you're wondering where he is on the pitch, he's in central areas in his own defensive half. So he's asking for the ball, the ball gets played to him, and then he shows the ball to the opponent. He tries to do a round Cruyff turn and opens up his body shape so the ball is in sight of the opponent. What he should be doing here is using his back to protect the ball away from the opponent. So receiving on his right foot, not his left foot, and he gets dispossessed and the opponent's break on him. So again, I'm not saying he's perfect, because that clearly, there's an example of him doing the wrong thing pretty much. So he's not the perfect or the finished article, but there is times where he's excellent at receiving in tight areas. And even if we move it on to this example, he receives under intense pressure, but he does a little bit of footwork and a back heel, and he moves away from the pressure and draws a foul. So I'm not going to sit here and lie to you and say he's going to fix everything. He's the best player in the world. He's going to win the Ballon d'Or, because he's not. He's not perfect. Nobody probably is perfect. I'm not perfect. You're not perfect. Every footballer isn't perfect. So he does have flaws to his game. Now, playmaking is a very strong quality of his game, because he's very innovative with his ideas on how he wants the game to plan out. Now, I've previously been critical of his rate of pass, but that has massively improved over time. But what I really do like about his game is how he sees the game, the picture he plays in his mind, and how he sees, spots runners, and has the execution to find the runners. It's absolutely beautiful. So the ideas are there, and he's a risk taker. Sometimes, well, with players like this, with flair players, somebody that needs to open up the game, if they have 100% pass completion rate, there's a problem, because that means he's just going backwards. So when they don't complete every pass, that is okay, because when you take risks, the risk always won't come off. But that's how you earn the reward, and you need risk takers in your squad. You also need your manager to give the license for him to be able to deliver and execute those risks. Now, another big quality he has, and I'd argue it's one of his biggest qualities, is his awareness. Frequently scanning, understanding teammates, but also opponents' whereabouts. And you can just see from the way he plays, he's got a good picture of the game, and he's got a high football IQ. You can see he likes to come centrally. You need good awareness if you're going to receive in central areas. Now, when it comes to movement, his awareness helps him drift inside and find space between the lines, but that also hides some of his weaknesses. Now, there will be times where he does beat people in wide areas, but sometimes when he's pinning up a fullback, he does struggle to create separation a little bit. As you can see from this image, he's pinned up his left back, and you're just asking him just to find a yard of space and put a cross in. But again, he turns back onto his left foot and ends up going backwards to the fullback. So again, this is one of his weaknesses. When he's in those areas where he's not got a lot of space or innovation and he can't play on instincts, sometimes he's too easily forced backwards. But when it comes to finding space, he's so good at finding space for himself, but also teammates. Now, one thing he does do, which goes incredibly under the radar, he likes to run in behind. He hasn't got the pace, the athleticism, but he does it. Now, I think we need somebody that is comfortable drifting inside, because that's how you create overloads. The best way to get around the opposition is creating overloads all over the pitch. Somebody that is comfortable creating 2v1s in wide areas, but is also comfortable creating 4 against 3 in central areas. And this is how Monaco use him. He's that spare man in the middle of the pitch. And as you can see from this pass connection map, his average positioning is quite central. And that's because he's tasked with the responsibility of coming inside and creating those overloads. So let's break down some more of his attributes. Pace and agility. He lacks the explosive speed, but compensates it with agility and intelligence. This is why I don't like him acting like a touchline winger, because he doesn't have the attributes to stay consistently high and wide. He will do that at times just to create width, but if you want to get the best out of Maghnes Aklouche, you need to give him the freedom to roam into half spaces. And this is why comparing him to Anthony Elanga or Anthony Gordon isn't correct, because they're two different types of profile of wingers. Now, when it comes to his physicality, he's quite a slim build, meaning he struggles at times when he's driving forward under pressure. He's athletic without being extremely athletic. He's not like an Anthony Elanga type of athletic. He's just got that ability just to escape pressure dead easily. So where he shines in the athletic department is his ability to ride challenges. But that also highlights his awareness. Now, over time, from when he first stepped into senior football, you can tell he's starting to understand how to use his body a lot better. Now, when you're asking a player to consistently receive under pressure or in pockets of space, you've got to expect them to be dispossessed some of the times. You've got to expect them to lose possession, because they're taking risks with their touches, and that is okay. But when he does ride the challenge, that opens up the game for you and allows you to break on the opposition. So he's not just a dribbler, he's a player that's got the mentality, the mindset, the picture, the intelligence to create space for himself and his teammates. Newcastle lack a player who can manipulate space but also take risks. Maghnes Aklouche could bring that. Now, even if we're moving on to his stats this season, let's start with these passes. He's averaging 5.75 progressive passes per 90, which is very pleasing. 1.73 key passes, 3.82 passes in the final third, and 2.01 passes into the penalty area. He's a player that wants to play forwards. Even if we're moving on to the possession, he's averaging more touches in the attacking third than any other third. He's also averaging 3.89 progressive carries per 90, 3.01 carries into the final third, and over 1.5 successful take-ons per 90. Now, this is what I enjoy. The goal and shot creations. He's averaging 4.31 shot creating actions per 90, and most of them come off a pass. 3.42 come off a live pass. So that goes to show he doesn't rely on dribbling or speed. He relies on intelligence. Now, if we'll quickly touch upon some of these areas for improvement, dribbling's one. Now, that's surprising because I've said he's so technically good in possession, but he sometimes focuses too much on control over what he should be doing with his body to manipulate the opponent. And then decision making, he has the flair, he has the creativity, but sometimes overcomplicates the situations. Physicality and endurance, I've already touched upon them. And then one thing I would like to see him add to his game is more goals, getting into better positions. And then surprisingly, because I've said one of his biggest strengths is his awareness, but sometimes his movement can be off. And what I mean by that, he gets caught ball watching. Sometimes he can be guilty to gravitate towards a ball, especially when he's not getting much joy throughout the game. That's everything you need to know about Maghnes Aklouche. But I want to hear your thoughts. Is that the type of profile you want to see at Newcastle? Do you think it would blend well with Eddie Howe's tactics? Let me know in the comments below. But if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. But also, tomorrow will be a review of tonight's game. Cannot wait for that. Have a nice day. Until next time, away the lads.